call this meeting to order. It's the 11th meeting in 2024. It's a special committee of the whole meeting. After this section is done, there will be a 10-minute break before the council meeting starts in full. Please note this meeting is broadcast live and recorded. The adoption of the agenda is going to be as amended because item 5.12 has previously been dealt with at the last count and is now part of the consent agenda. So if I could ask Councillor McRae, please, in relation to the adoption of the agenda.
That the agenda for the special committee of the whole meeting of August 27th, 2024 be adopted as presented.
Thank you. Disclosure of community interest and any conflict of interest in general nature thereof. Well, sorry, I need to vote on community board. I tried to learn my lesson from last meeting. Yes. I'll call that question, please. And that's unanimous for those that are here. I should have mentioned that the Deputy Mayor will not be joining us this evening. So, community interest, usual reminder that you can declare that at any point during the meeting. Correspondence. I'm going to ask that the Councillor Smith move the motion, and then we'll take each part of the correspondence point by point if we wish to discuss it.
As recommended by the Committee of the Whole, be it resolved that the Council of the Town of Perth receive for information the following correspondence: the 23-24 President's Annual Report from Perth Seniors Fellowship, the correspondence from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Planning Act and Development Charges Act, regulations related to the Cutting Red Tape to Build More Homes Act, 2024 Bill 185, dated July 3, 2024. Lost my place there. The correspondence from AMO advocacy on. I can't read that with the black things on top of it. Homelessness encampments dated July 3, 2024. And 4, the thank you correspondence from Tim Zander, Chair, Perth District Sports Hall of Fame, dated July 17, 2024.
Thank you. So if with council's consent, I'll just take them through one by one in the order they're presented and see if anybody wishes to speak to them. The first being the Perth Seniors Fellowship report, President's Annual Report. Wish to speak to that? Your Worship.
Yeah, in regard to the Seniors Fellowship, this is pretty well completely a volunteer organization. If we give them a little bit more insurance, and they run their schedule of activities is amazing. So it's great to have so many people that are work to develop activities for seniors and done it on their own. Great resource.
Yes, yes. I think everybody had a hard copy of the report that's in there. Thank you. The next item, July 3rd, 2020. Sorry, MFJ Planning Act and Development Charges Act Grade. Cutting Red Tape Build More Homes Act 2024. Anybody wish to speak to that? No. Colin Best, AMO President, AMO Advocacy on Homelessness Encampments. No. And from Tim Zander, Chair, Perth District Sports Hall of Fame. Thank you, Letter. No. Okay, I'll call the question in relation to receiving that correspondence. Those in favour? And that's unanimous. Okay, next item is request for action. And again, I'll just go through this in order. So we received a Stephanie Drummond speaking note. Anybody wish to speak to that? Yeah.
Through the chair, so council will recall, Stephanie Drummond came and made a presentation earlier this year on the natural health products. Council asked for more information from local health professionals, so those letters are attached there, the responses. That was to be brought back to council. So you can, there's no motion recommended from staff here, as it's a value decision for council to make, so you can receive more information. Or you can support the original request from Stephanie Drummond.
So that's looking for anybody who wishes to speak to that or make motions. Councillor Woodfield, Councillor McRae, and then your worship.
Chair, I would like to move a motion that we accept this purely for information.
Thank you. That's on the floor right now. Anybody wish to speak to that motion received purely for information? Councillor McRae.
I would just add, I'd like to add a little light to the situation and that is, having, received these, 3 letters and, the information that they contain. John Jordan, the MPP, has stated he doesn't have a position. But he does believe Health Canada has sufficient legislative power to keep Canadians safe. Scott Reid, as you know, is very much in favor of Bill C-368. I'd like to quote, he says, it is past the second reading now and has been referred to the Standing Committee on Health, where industry experts and Canadians across Canada will finally have their voice heard on how the actions of the government will affect their personal health decisions. And finally, the respected opinions of our own Dr. Tom Morrell. He points out 5 different items: safety concerns, lack of standardization, consumer protection, impact on healthcare providers, and regulatory oversight. And although this was an ambitious initiative on Stephanie Drummond's part, I move that we just receive it as information, we don't go forward. Due to the comments made by Dr. Thomas Morrell, but also because of the comments made by Scott Reid, stating that it is now being referred to the Standing Committee on Health, and Canadians will finally have their voices heard on the matter. So I don't see any need to proceed. We're kind of behind the 8 ball on this in terms of, I think her request was to write a letter. She was wanting all of the municipalities to write a letter. And if it's at second reading and before the Standing Committee, we're kind of behind the scene on this one. So I don't see any need to go any further.
Thank you. Thank you, your worship.
My comment was going to be the same as Councilor Waterfield, if we receive it as information.
Thank you. Well, unless someone else wishes to speak, I'll call that question then. That we receive it for information. Those in favour? And that's unanimous. Next item is 4.22. Downtown Heritage Perth BIA procedural bylaw. And the mover of that is Councillor McRae, please.
As recommended by the Committee of the Whole, be it resolved, the Council of the Town of Perth approve the Downtown Heritage Perth BIA procedural bylaw.
Thank you. Did anyone, well, you moved the motion, I'll go to you first of all, because you are on the BIA.
Yeah. I just want to congratulate John McEntee and all members of the BIA in working very close with our previous clerk, Susan Beckel, and Sheldon Giff on this document. It was something that really needed to be dug into and considered. And I believe they've come up with a great document, and I think it's just brought a lot of procedural issues and those types of things to bear, so that people sitting on the BIA have a better understanding of things like closed meetings, code of conduct, those types of things. So I think it's a very good document, and I'm definitely in favor of it.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak to that? No, thank you for pointing out the involvement with the town staff. I call the question, those in favour? That's unanimous. 4.23, resignation letter from on the climate change panel. Have you read that, please, Your Worship? 4.2.3.
As recommended by the committee of the whole, be it resolved that the council of the town of Burton accept with regret the resignation of Andy Colburn from the climate change advisory panel.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to speak to that? Motion is on the floor. Call the question. Those in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous. Now, we've agreed that, actually, the Town Council, we agreed that anything that was going to be moved by the Deputy Mayor, who's not present tonight, would be by Councillor McCrae. So you're ready for the next one? 4.24.
Okay, this is a long one.
It is. Take it away.
Okay, as recommended by the committee of the whole, be it resolved that the council of the town of Perth supports the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, AMO, and the Ontario Medical Association, OMA, advocating for a better healthcare system for Ontario residents and communities. And further, whereas the state of healthcare in Ontario is in crisis, with 2.3 million Ontarians lacking access to a family doctor, emergency room closures across the province, patients being de-rostered, and 40% of family doctors considering retirement over the next 5 years. And whereas it has become increasingly challenging to attract and retain an adequate healthcare workforce throughout the health sector across Ontario. And whereas Ontario municipal governments play an integral role in the healthcare system through responsibilities in public health, long-term care, and paramedicine. And whereas the percentage of family physicians practicing comprehensive family medicine has declined from 77 in 2008 to 65% in 2022. And whereas per capita healthcare spending in Ontario is the lowest of all provinces in Canada. And whereas a robust workforce developed through a provincial sector-wide health human resource strategy would significantly improve access to health services across the province. Now therefore be it resolved that the Council of the Town of Perth urge the province of Ontario to recognize the physician shortage in the town of Perth and Ontario, and to fund healthcare appropriately and ensure every Ontarian has access to physical care.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to speak to that? Yes, our vote will speak to that. So I'll call the question. Those in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous. You're up again, Your Worship, for 4.25. Executive Director of the Health Centre. If you could just put the motion on the floor first.
As recommended by the committee of the whole, it resolved that the council of the town of Perth direct staff to forward the attached letters to the Ontario Minister of Health, Sylvia Jones, in support of the provincial funding for the Cheney River Health Center and Charlotte Lake Family Health Teams.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to discuss that? With a reminder that in the full council meetings to follow that, there is going to be a delegation in relation to this presentation from the team. So I'll call the question. Those in favour? Okay, that's passed. That information will be passed on to the delegation when they arrive. Okay, we want to start reports. First one, 5.1, approval of site plan control agreements, and moved by Councillor Woodfield, please.
As recommended by the committee of the whole, be it resolved that the council of the town of Perth, one, as bylaw number 51, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and the clerk to complete a site plan control agreement with 2739701 Ontario Inc. General Motors Dealership for lands municipally known as 65 Dufferin Street, as presented in report 2024, COW 10.4, and 2, as a bylaw number 51, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to complete a site plan control agreement with RGS SS Ventures Inc. for lands known municipally as 40 Sunset Boulevard, as presented in report 2024, COW 10.4.
Thank you. Before any questions, I'll just have the director speak to that if I may, just.
I just looking for clarity, since I guess it's probably a bit of a. Correct. I was trying to do two things at once, it's just essentially to pass some site plan control agreements. So the first one is the GM dealership, which I believe you're all aware of, it's actually currently under construction because we did collect securities and have them sign the agreement, so this sort of side of things is just getting that cleaned up and worked through. And the second one is for Sunset, sorry. Or Sunset. And that was, they had applied for a consent or a severance application to divide their land. Sort of in half, not quite half, but we didn't have an existing site plan on site when it was built. And so we asked them to give us a site plan of what it was existing as part of the clearance of conditions of the consent application. So that's what this is. It's just an agreement that's already indicating what is on site to have to pass their condition of consent.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Bolt, so your hand first.
Yes, thanks, Chair. So basically, could you just explain to me and to anybody else who is listening in exactly what site plan control involves and where it takes us with this particular development? Does it take us right to the end? Are there steps in between that have to be looked at? Just from that standpoint. And Coles Notes version, please.
Okay. I'll try to Coles knows this. Site plan control agreement, I think I sort of keep harping on is about functionality, how does the site function, so. And then some nicer things like where are the trees, what type of trees, where is the parking, where is the garbage, where is the lighting? Do we have the correct access and egress? All in all to make a place function the way it should. Site plan control agreements are required for commercial and industrial businesses and residential over 10 units. It used to be for for almost everything, but that has been taken away by Bill 23. But in this case, this site plan control agreement was required because it's commercial. It can be done holistically, like the whole property, which is what was done here. It can also be broken up into phases, so phase one. Say for the GM, the actual GM dealership proper could have been phase one, and we outlined these certain things will be done by this time at this cost. With these conditions, phase two would be, your shed or whatever other things are happening, so you can split your site plan control agreements into different phases that make it make it easier for a developer to break it down and pay securities at individual times and have works completed during different timeframes. This was one that was done as a whole, and they are moving forward. The site plan control application is not the last stage, it's the building permit. They were given a conditional building permit. Because this process, we didn't have reviews in July, and we didn't want to hold them up for a month, so we gave them conditional permit based on getting this agreement, and we have collected a significant amount of securities as they're ongoing.
Just a follow-up question, if I may. So based on that information, would you say that they, it's a two-pronged question. Would you say that A, are they on time, and B, what is the anticipated completion date of this project?
They could probably answer that more clearly. They don't let me in on when they want it done. I can say that there were some issues when they were pouring foundation because it was raining all the time, and so they couldn't get, the proper days to make that happen. We tried to accommodate that as best as we could.
Thank you. Councillor Craig, I believe you.
I'm just trying to determine the difference between, because when we get to our council meeting, we have a particular property where they have the site plan control agreement, and right after that, there's the development agreement. And could you just, for us, Joanna, could you just differentiate those two classifications? The difference between a site plan agreement and a development agreement.
They're very similar. They're very quite similar. A development agreement is generally more. In some cases, like just recognizing there is one or two particular issues on a property, so. As a rural example, because that's where I've seen it done more commonly. Someone wants to develop a piece of land, but they don't have. Necessarily all their ducks in a row, but they want to get a severance approved. And they're just not gonna meet the timeframe for the severance. So we do a development agreement where we say, oh, look, there's a wetland here. You need to acknowledge that there is a wetland here and we will stay out of that area. Within a certain number of.
You're kind of zeroing in.
You sort of zeroing on the concerns, the major concerns without getting into specifics, generally due to time constraints.
Okay, thank you.
Honestly haven't done very many. Like that's,
Your worship.
yeah,
Yeah, Joanna and Michael and I met with the head salesperson from the GM dealership. I'd like to know these people and know what they're about, so he said they were hoping to open in November, but it would be more likely February, as things are playing out. I remember when we were talking about the strategic plan and the necessity to do economic development. This certainly shows that economic development is happening, and I congratulate the staff for what they have done to bring this about. It's happening almost that we're unaware of it. And the population is now up to almost 7,000. First time in decades. So things are going well.
I have a question, if I may, about 40 Sunset, and this is more for the community as a whole. Everybody else that may be listening will find out later. 40 Sunset is probably commonly known as the newer, older brown shoe factory. So if you look at it, you've got a commercial property that's in various units on the right of structure. And as you look at it from Sunset Boulevard, and on the left, you've got a huge green area. Is that what we're talking about separating?
correct,
The green area for the purpose of development?
yes.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I'll call that. Those in favour? It's unanimous. Okay, 5-2, Councillor Waterfield, up again.
As recommended by the committee of the whole, be it resolved that the council of the town of Perth, one, pass bylaw number 51, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to complete a development agreement with RGSS Ventures Inc. for lands municipally known as 40 Sunset Boulevard, as presented in report 2024, POW 10.5. And 2, pass bylaw number 51, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to complete a development agreement with Reagan Lee, Sheila Vera Lee, and 1823-169 Ontario Inc. for lands municipally known as 24 Howe Street North, as presented in report 2024, POW 10.5.
Any questions? No, just for council's information, I voted against the zoning change for this property, so I can't in good favour voting it, and I won't be voting in favour of this stage either, be inappropriate. I'll call the question, those in favour? Thanks, 4, with 1 dissent. Passes. Councillor Craig, again, 5.3, please. You good?
As recommended by the committee of the whole, be it resolved that the council of the town of Perth receive the non-audited financial statement for the corporation of the town of Perth to June 30th, 2021. As presented in the report, 2024 committee of the whole 10-6.
Thank you. I think if it's okay with council, it's usually best practice, particularly with finances, to let the director speak first and then us. Thank you.
So, there's not too much on the first 6 months of the year. They pretty much been according to budget. We're slightly ahead of budget in terms of we're generating more contribution than was expected. Some of that is timing differences, but essentially we're maintaining strong positions in both cash and working capital at this point in time. The only things I would draw your attention to are the 2 items I added to the end of the notes, which are forward-looking items in terms of where I thought there might be material differences rising during the year. The first one is we've gone back and we've done a review of the closure costs for the landfill site for the previous year. And the estimate that we had was going to be 225,000 over a 3-year time frame. But the review of the site in consultation with the engineers indicated it's probably going to be closer to 835,000. And that's going to have to be recognized as an asset retirement obligation in 2024. So eventually that will show up and it will be actioned out expected in 2025. And it's included in the likely capital budget for 2025. That's one thing. The second thing is the Ministry of the Solicitor General has mandated that we upgrade our POA systems for the end of the year. And that cost essentially is being mandated by the ministry, and we're getting minimal resource allocation from the ministry to support it. And it's looking like that cost will be significantly higher, possibly as much as 160,000 higher than what we thought it was going to be. Not really totally within our control, and the dominant effect is that it reduces the payouts to the other municipalities in Lanark County for POA. And I forewarned them that was likely going to occur, so probably not a surprise to them. I'm a bit surprised at how much more it's going to be, but it is a fairly antiquated system, so there's a lot of upgrading going on. And at the same time, we're upgrading servers and switches and all kinds of firmware stuff in the background. So that's playing out as well. And by the end of the year, though, we expect to be in a much stronger position overall, sustainability in the IT side of it. So those would be my 2 points. Glad to answer any questions on anything else.
Councillor Bolt and then Councillor Wolford.
Thank you, Chair. So Brian, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but I understand how quickly things evolve when it comes to IT. I guess my question or concern is, so here we are spending a whole bunch of money for IT upgrades. It doesn't seem that it was that long ago, although maybe it was, that we had to go through this before. Like, is this going to be a cyclical thing? Are we looking at it like every 5 years having to update our systems to keep up with the changing times? Do you have any feeling for that at all?
Absolute maximum would be 5 years actually for updating switches and firewalls and our software. And you'll note that we've moved to a higher level of Microsoft Office protection now. That's what was all installed. And that's the cybersecurity threats are constantly increasing, and we're trying to keep track of that, right? So the POA system's a bit of an anomaly because it hasn't been upgraded. The ministry's been looking at upgrading it for 20-25 years and haven't done it. So this is a big one-off, but our annual spend on IT security will certainly be consistently increasing, and I expect it to be cyclical over a 4 to 5 year period. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, if I can just jump in on that too. Just throughout the summer, as I noted earlier in the summer, we had 2 IT summer students or interns. I just want to commend Brian and those 2 employees who have done, not done yet, but a lot of yes, there are a lot of costs and other things for upgrades, but through that process, a lot of efficiencies have been identified, which will result in a lot of cost savings, and some of the other projects that are underway or that we will complete yet before the end of the year will reduce some of those costs in the future. So yes, there's a bunch of costs right now, but I think ongoing, a lot of the should be less expensive.
Councillor Waterfield.
Through the chair to Brian. Brian, when I was reading the report, two questions. I noted that reserves have decreased by 400K from 23 to 15.4 million. Why is that? And does it concern you at all?
The reserves are concerning, if you look back to the approved budget where we were predicting where reserves were gonna be by the end of the year, they're dropping by millions of dollars. And if you go back to the budget presentations of last year, you'll note that the water and sewer reserve is likely to drop to around 3 to 4 million, and the capital reserve is likely to drop to around 2 million. That doesn't give us much in the way of risk mitigation when we compare that to our total asset base, which is probably at current replacement values in excess of $1 billion. So it's definitely concerning, but it's a symptom of the capital projects we're adopting. And in comparison, relatively in comparison to the operating contribution. So we generally create operating contribution from operations about 3.5 million a year. So anything we spend in excess of that drops the reserves. And this year we're running multiple road segments, so we're stopping reserves quickly. And we're gonna get into it again in the budget discussions, just so council has a very good handle on where reserves are, where they're going, and what needs to be done. And actually, I'm gonna touch on when we get to the asset management part later anyway.
If I could ask a question, it's kind of double barrel. First one probably for you, Director Burns, and then perhaps Director Mahan. You talked, is it fair to say that, it's just a reminder to everybody, not so much council as the community again, that we are required and have been required now as part of the provincial legislation and directives to actually look at the cost of our assets. And if we chose to end that asset and remove that asset, we have to account for that and have a figure for that as well. Is that basically fair?
The ministry is basically through the regulation, which 58817 asset management and other, are expecting municipalities to have a long-term view of their asset base and their replacements. I think the perception was that municipalities generally weren't looking that far in the future, and were basically dealing with their asset base on a one-off every year basis. And they definitely said, no, they expect to see a 5 to 10 year time frame of planning process, which is essentially what we're doing. We're doing about a 10-year planning horizon now. And I think we have a pretty good handle on our asset base. As good a handle, I think, on ours as any of the other municipalities do in Ontario right now. So, yeah, we'll be bringing that forward, and some of that will happen in the asset management report, and some of it will happen during the budget process, yes.
So, yeah, thank you. So that was general. The specific part of that I want to talk about, we talked about the waste management plan. And feel free, please, Director Mann, to jump in here, but again, not a note of alarm. Eventually, all things come to their end of life. But is it fair to say that we have extended the life of the waste management plan fairly recently? But there is the possibility that we could do it again one more time after. Is that fair?
I'll speak for Grant, you can kick me if I'm wrong, but yes, that's fair. I will note that the Canadian Public Accounting Institutes, particularly, and I know our auditor touched on this when we presented the audit of financials, the asset retirement obligations are much more prevalent now in financial statements than used to be. And that encompasses the landfill, and particularly asbestos contamination in buildings, which we have very little actually, but the landfill's fairly material and it needs to be accounted for on an annual basis and reevaluated. And that's essentially where this increase in the liability came, which is the the view is that it's gonna require more capping in the old landfill site than we were expecting. Well, I'll say the figure was quite a bit higher when we first started looking at it, and it's moderated down to this now. But yes, there's a lot more visibility on asset retirement obligations generally within the accounting profession and municipal as well.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Wakefield.
Through the chair to Brian. Brian, when I looked at revenues, I saw a variance in that the tax levy budget was 4612, and the actual is 4555. Not a lot, but any comment?
Through the chair, there was a complaint made over impact assessment, in fact admitted that they hadn't assessed correctly. And that resulted in an overall refund to one of the taxpayers in town. I expect actually in the long term, our supplementals, that's kind of a timing difference. I expect over the year, the supplementals will compensate for that and it'll probably be back on the budget. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Your worship.
Just in terms of assessment, I was under the impression the assessment office is only doing, new bills right now, is that correct?
They are assessing you as well, but anybody who feels that their assessment is unfair and make application and impact to change their assessment base.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, comments, I'll call the question itself. Motion on the floor. Those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you. Councillor McCready, you've got the next two as well. You should be being paid by line tonight.
Approval for grant submission to the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation. As recommended by the Committee of the Whole, be it resolved that the Council of the Town of Perth approve a grant submission to the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation under the Housing Accelerator Fund Program Round 2 as presented in report 2024 Committee of the Whole 10-8.
Thank you. Any questions, observations? Councillor McGrath.
I'd like Brian maybe to speak a little bit to this grant. It talks about our provincial housing growth as one of the targets they use. Is that correct in determining whether or not you get this grant? And also I read somewhere there's a substantial funding, it's a substantial funding application. And there's mention of 3.4 to 4.2 million. Could you elaborate? That's a big grant. If we are able to secure that.
Yeah, so through the chair, this is the second phase of the HAF, the Housing Accelerator Fund funding. We applied for, Council may recall, we applied for phase one, we were not successful. That particular application was for $5.6 million, much of which was flow through to developers to put up affordable housing in town. This particular grant envelope is much smaller than that original one, and our application is smaller, comparably. So we're down to about the 3.4 to 4.2 million in terms of the total application, with the intent of facilitating affordable housing in town, partially through grants to developers and partially through funding of infrastructure that would be required to put those affordable housing units in place. So I'm kind of hoping we're successful in this one. I'm sure it's going to be affordably oversubscribed like the first one, but it never hurts to try.
Thank you. Seeing no further question, I call the question. Those in favour? That is unanimous. 5.5, please.
This is another grant application for fire protection. Actually spare bunker gear for our fire department. As recommended by the Committee of the Whole, be it resolved that the Council of the Town of Perth authorize the Director of Protective Services, Fire Chief, to submit a grant application to the Office of the Fire Marshal for the 2024-2025 Fire Protection Grant for the purchase of 15 sets of bunker gear.
Thank you. Any, yes, Councillor McGrath.
So my understanding, and through you, Chair, my understanding, and Trevor can certainly jump in, is our fire department needs 15. And 15 of these sets of bunker gear. And I think there's something like $3,000 a pop, so that's, the grant would be for $45,000. And this gear is to prevent cancer that is given from the toxins of hazardous and chemical materials. So I think it's extremely important that we move this grant forward.
Any observation or clarification? I think council's pretty much on board with this, but
Yeah, I'll be quick. Yes, this is a 3-year grant, so if we don't get the grant this year, we're gonna try again next year. We have been successful in the emergency preparedness grant, so fingers crossed we get this. Now, we are in very good shape. We're in a 5-year replacement program, so we have up to 10, 11 sets right now. We're able to cycle in and out. The goal is to get everyone a second set, and this grant would certainly help, so we're gonna approval type a little bit tomorrow and submit it for September 5th.
fantastic. I'm sure you don't score, right? I'll call the question then. Those in favour? And that's unanimous. Fast. 5.6, councillor Smith, please, from the water tender.
As recommended by the committee of the whole, be it resolved that the council of the town of Perth, one, award tender number ES 2024-06 to Solid State Electric Inc. for the supply and installation of 2 natural gas powered backup generators at Jamesville Pump Station and at 1881 Rogers Road, Fire Hall, in the amount of $220,720 plus HST, and 2 pass bylaw number 51XX, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into an agreement with Solid State Electric Inc. for the supply and installation of 2 natural gas powered backup generators as presented in report 2024-CAL-10.11.
Any questions from council? Any observations from the director?
Just to identify that we're changing both these generators because they're end of life, but we're also moving forward with making them natural gas powered rather than diesel, which what they are now. And that gives us more fuel dependency on a grid like natural gas rather than depending on contractors bringing us diesel. There's also a longer service record with natural gas rather than diesel for as far as maintaining that. So that's why we're moving ahead with natural gas supply.
Thank you. Councillor Bolt.
Grant, I like the way you're talking, but was the cost significantly higher for natural gas versus diesel?
Through the chair, in the long term, it was equivalent. Where we have to extend natural gas lines for this, and it's included in this price. But we would have to replace the diesel tanks and have ongoing certification for those tanks, which will all balance it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good question. Thank you. I'll call the question. Those in favour? That's unanimous. Pass. Councillor Smith, you're up again for 5.7.
As recommended by the committee of the whole, be it resolved that the council of the town of Perth, 1, award contract ES 2024-08, multi-year catch basin cleaning and CCTV program to Aqua Drain Sewer Services Incorporated to complete multi-year catch basin cleaning and CCTV program in the amount of $117,565 plus HST, and 3, pass bylaw number 51XX, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into an agreement with Aqua Drain Sewer Services to complete the multi-year catch basin cleaning and CCTV program as presented in report 2024-CAL-10.12.
Thank you. Just any observations on that before I ask the questions?
This is a regular multi-year agreement that we have with the various hollow market services. It's in line with the approved budget, and it's just a regular process that we do by doing it 3 yearly, then we can depend on the budgeting a little more affirmative.
Thank you. Question, councillor Bolton, then councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. So, Grant, have we always used outside firms? It's just, this isn't something we could do with our own staff, is it?
Through the chair, this is the large vacuum truck you see around, urban centers vacuuming. There are no local contractors that have this capacity. A specialized truck, but your general city of Ottawa type trucks you see on the road are what this is about.
Just wanted clarification, thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Question to Grant, through the chair. What is a CCTV program?
Through the chair, it's closed circuit television, so when we find a problem underground, this company has a fiber optic camera that they can insert in pipes and we can determine the problem and dig it more effectively.
Thank you.
Thank you, Grant.
I'll call the question. Those in favour? Let's pass unanimously. Councillor Smith, you and councillor McCray are in the race.
As recommended by the committee of the whole, be it resolved that the council of the town of Perth award tender number ES 2024-07 sidewalk installation on Tree Lawn Boulevard to Norwood and Company for the construction of a sidewalk on Tree Lawn Boulevard at a cost of $210,402 plus HST, and 2, pass bylaw number 51XX, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into an agreement with Norwood and Company for the construction of the sidewalk on Tree Lawn Boulevard as presented in report 2024-CAL-10.13.
If you don't mind, Director, I think it's fairly self-explanatory. Any questions? Councillor Waterfield.
Through the chair to Grant, if this is passed by Cal and council tonight, what will be your guesstimate as to start and finish the project?
Through the chair, probably a month to 6 weeks. Now, I'm gonna caveat that a little bit because getting locates, underground locates right now, we've been notified in the industry, it's very delayed. So I'm not as concerned with the contractor doing the works, that'll go fine. It's getting those underground locates that are necessary for the commencement of the project.
Any other questions? I'll call the question. Those in favour? And that is unanimous. Pass. Councillor Smith, yet again.
As recommended by the committee of the whole, be it resolved that the council of the town of Perth one award request for proposal number ES 2024-09 to Upland and Martin Consultants Limited for multi-year engineering design services in the amount of $145,465 plus HST, and 2, pass bylaw number 51XX, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into an agreement with Upland and Martin Consultants Limited for multi-year engineering design services as presented in report 2024-CAL-10.14.
Ask the director to speak to that.
Yes, Mr. Chair, this was a multi-year engineering, establishing a multi-year library for all our construction works. Council has agreed to go ahead with this, and by going this far ahead into the future, we're going to be able to enable that list that's over on the wall for all our capital projects. What it's going to do to us is allow to get tenders out very early in the process and possibly multi-year tenders for projects, so it's more effective and more guaranteed. Essentially, we'll be coming to the budget process with a tendered amount. So this company may not have heard of Upland and Martin, but it's a couple of members of the former Macintosh area firm that have set up a local firm, and so their prices are very effective, and though the name isn't known to us, the players that make up the team are known to us. I'm strongly recommending we advance.
Thank you. Questions? And this would be part of our, it's not a policy of council, but it's a practice we've tried to adopt. It's of getting tenders out early and multi-year. We've expressed a desire to do that in the past. So this is a step, necessary step in that.
That's correct.
Thank you. I'll call the question, those in favour? Passed unanimously. Councillor Craig, 510.
Corporate Asset Management Plan. As recommended by the committee of the whole, be it resolved that the council of the town of Perth accept for information the updated schedules relating to the corporate asset management plan as presented in report 2024 Committee of the Whole 10-15.
Thank you. To speak to that, please.
Certainly, so after every fiscal year is completed, we update the asset management plan projections for replacements. Assumptions on increases in rates, so for instance, consumer price index is a good parallel to the increase in vehicles. Commercial vehicles, not specific vehicles actually. And we go through the whole process where we redo it and reproject it. And we also do a projection of reserve balances that result from that and a whole variety of assumptions. You'll see I've included the proposed, not proposed, so what would be the asset management expenditures over to 2035, which would be $195 million, a little beyond our capacity right now, so not likely to happen. But I have included the 5 years, what the capital budget, the next 5 years, what the capital budget would look like based on the asset management plan. And the process, of course, is every year senior management goes through that list and says, no, we don't think we need to replace this can be deferred a year, or no, we think maybe that one should be accelerated up. So these are indicative of what the calculations are showing right now. Probably be close to that when we come back to you in October, November for the budget, but we'll have to remove some items that we don't think actually need to be actioned that quickly. There was some fairly significant increases in fire equipment, particularly fire vehicles, which is just symptomatic of a shortage of manufacturers for those units right now, and that's driving the price up, generally speaking. The rest of it's pretty normal. I will say though that based on the 5 years, and if you take those 5 years as capital budgets, knowing what we know about our operations, we're going to need additional debt of $3 million next year, $9 million in 2027, another $3 million in 2029. The 2027 debt is highly reliant on the Highway 7 redo by the province, and then we have to redo all the water and sewer infrastructure around that. So that's causing us some significant expenditure. Of course, we'd be upgraded at the same time. So that does drive up our debt usage. I will note that our total debt usage is also going to be impacted by any developments in town. For instance, if we need a water tower earlier rather than later, and the development takes 5 to 7 years, we're going to have to fund that early water tower, as a for instance. So that's going to drive us up, and part of the discussion we're going to have in budget this year is basically how our spending limits doing vis-a-vis our increases in property tax rates and water and sewer tax rates. But this gives you a good sort of idea of what the next 5 years looks like based on the asset management plan. Well noted in 2029, we haven't specified a specific road segment. We put in $3.2 million, that seems to be kind of the average for a road segment, and we still have to figure out which road segment that is. It's a little further down the path, so we have time to do that. Glad to answer any questions.
Councillor Ball, and then Councillor Woodford, and Matt.
So, thank you, Chair. So Brian, if I'm understanding this correctly, this is all money that has to be borrowed. There's no money left in the reserve well for these projected costs?
So, the Chair, when I look at these 5 years, as I said earlier, our reserves are dropping rather significantly. So the capital reserves dropping to 2 million. And the only reason it's staying at 2 million is because we're borrowing 6. And the only reason the water and sewer reserve is staying at 4 is because we're borrowing another 7. Right? Otherwise, both of those reserves would be in the negatives, if you harken back to the budget presentations last year, that's exactly what it was showing, that without borrowing, our reserves are gonna be flying into a huge negative balance. And even as, for instance, if you look at 2025, there's an $8 million spend, we only make $3.5 million a year in operations. So we're driving our reserves down $5.5 million just next year, which is why the $3 million loan next year is required to keep our reserves out of the negative.
So if I could, through the chair, so to me, the concern is looking forward. Just where are we going, for the common taxpayer in the town of Perth? Where are we going over the next 5, 7, 10 years, in taxes when we have to borrow millions and millions of dollars? Without any new money coming in. Yes, I stated recently that I was hoping that, new development in the town would offset some of our financial woes, but I don't see the new development happening quickly enough to help offset some of these debt requirements. So my question would be, and I don't expect you to answer this tonight, because I know you can't, but I would be interested in knowing, based on the projections that you're putting before us tonight and so on, where would you project, at some point, I'd like to know, where would you project the actual overall debt for the corporation of the town of Perth to be 5 years from now versus where it is now?
Excellent question. And I can answer it now because we've been working on it for weeks now. So answer a couple of your questions in sequence. I expect the rate increases in water and sewer will be around 6% a year into perpetuity. That's the only thing that's going to keep the water and sewer reserve sort of in a positive balance. Property tax increases will be way above what they've been in the past. So if you look at the last 11 years, the property tax rate's actually gone down. At the same time, the CPI has gone up 30-something% and the construction price index has gone up 70-something%. So the purchasing value of the town has been eroded by a significant amount. That's got to come from somewhere, and it's going to come essentially from taxes moving forward. It's going to come from debt for a little while, and then we're going to start maxing out the debt. And just as an aside, growth pays for growth. Growth does not, generally speaking, provide any resources against existing infrastructure. So it's not a nice rosy scenario moving forward. It's going to be, and to be fair, we're not exactly alone in this, and we're not exactly alone. If you read any of this, City of Toronto went up 10%, and Ottawa is now suddenly facing, oh my God, we can't do all the infrastructure we can with a 2% tax rate increase a year, right? The most municipalities in Ontario went through about a 10-year time frame where they were trying to moderate property tax rate increases to see consumer price index less. So their rate increases tend to be 1 to 2% or lower. That's caught up with virtually everybody now. And now they're going, no, all of our infrastructure is coming due. We don't have enough reserves to pay for it. We have to borrow. We have a borrowing cap. That's going to be a discussion point during our budget process as well. Not a good one, I would say, from the point of view of people who are paying the bills, but it's definitely realistic.
Councillor Woodfield, then Councillor Gray.
Through the chair to Ryan. Ryan, just building on a couple of comments that Councillor Gold made. I'm really concerned about the upcoming debt of this corporation. I'm actually quite scared. And when we look at 3 million, 9 million, 3 million, you mentioned that you project property taxes will have to increase significantly. Could you be a little bit more specific? Are we talking in the coming years, your recommendation or whoever? Are we talking 6, 7, 8, 9%?
Oh, easily.
Pardon me?
Easily.
Easily? Thank you. So a comment, if I may.
So,
I'm extremely concerned for fellow citizens in town, looking at the next 4 to 5 years, looking at property tax increases of 6, 7, 8, 9%. It's obvious not everybody will be able to afford that. Yes, I would be in favor of borrowing to a degree, but we need to be prudent there. But beyond that, I think as a corporation, as a council, we need to start thinking outside the box. And there are two things I'll bring to the table as a comment, not for discussion tonight. Number one, I think we need to reach out to our fellow municipalities and look at possibilities of sharing services. And I think number two, I would support a serious look at amalgamation of surrounding municipalities, to see if there's a business case for that. We as a town simply can't go ahead gradually having the town on more and more debt and increasing to have property taxes at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10% a year. It just doesn't add up, so I'll just leave those comments on the table. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor McCrae.
Yes, through your chair. To Brian, and this may be way out in left field. Have we applied for the Ontario Infrastructure Fund?
Which one?
So I heard about that at our conference. Provinces provide 425 small rural and northern communities, 400 million. And when I looked at the actual Ontario Infrastructure Fund, and then I looked at all the work that you put into the corporate asset management plan. It's interesting, you don't need to actually apply, you have to provide planning and reporting documents in regards to the Ontario Infrastructure Fund. And I just thought, I mean, at every turn, we have to turn over every rock. And we have to be really vigilant when it comes to all of these grants. So, I'm not the authority on this grant by any shape or form, but I did hear about it in Amos, so I just thought I'd
Sure.
bring it forward. Maybe we've already, maybe it's.
Director will answer, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, I can answer this one. I just wasn't sure which infrastructure fund you were talking about. Some of them are specific grants, and some of them are ongoing. So it's called OCIF in our financial statements. We actually got an increase in OCIF because our asset management plan was in such good shape. We were able to project out what our replacement values were, which a lot of places didn't. So if you look at a lot of the municipalities in the area, particularly, their OCIF grants went down in 2024, and ours went up by 60 or 70,000. So we're at, we're at 580,000, I think, in the current year as the budget for OCIF, and that certainly funds some of our projects. And yeah, we're totally on top of it. Grant and I particularly go through the replacement cost and do the reporting on it every year to make sure we maximize what we can get out of it.
Thank you very much.
Just going to remind council before we proceed in relation to the motions on the floor, we are moving rapidly into budget discussions. And bearing that in mind, councillor Long.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make a comment along that same vein, and I want to echo fellow councillor Waterfield's concerns. When I hear comments made by our treasurer that we're going to be looking at, big tax increases over the next number of years, I sit here and shudder and go, look, we already have citizens that are at the breaking point. So I think this council has got to have some very serious discussions at budget time and look forward 5 years and start making some hard decisions. And I don't know where the answers are. I agree with Councillor McCrae. We have to reach out and find every grant we can find going forward, but it's a scary thought to think that the taxes, 6% sewer and water in perpetuity on top of 8, 9, 10%, I'm hearing, property taxes per year. I'm just having chills.
I appreciate that. I'm going to call the question shortly. I just, in fairness to the director, he has been warning of this for years and years and years. In budget discussions, a lot of his advice has gone unheeded. And I'm going to leave it at that. The only surprise I have here tonight is that councillors are surprised that this is where we're at now. No.
Yes, I thank you, Gary, for that question, and Brian for your answer. I think we've, to some extent, been deceiving ourselves about talking about keeping taxes down 3.5, whatever. That's just not going to meet the expenses we're going to face. So recently, Carl Place got a provincial government grant of $35 million. And when I first saw it, I thought, oh, they're rich, but they have to redo their water filtration plant, and all the expansion they've had is great, but there's a cost to it, so I think tonight is, we should be happy in a way that, you know, the light has finally turned on, we finally believe Brian when he tells us this, and we're going to have to shift our planning in a different direction, so that we, find other sources of revenue.
Thank you, Councilman Gray.
Just in closing, Chair, to you. I remember when I first came on council, and I remember distinctly Brian saying that what should have happened, rather than kicking the can down the road, is this municipality needed to do incremental tax increases. And so here we are at the crossing the roads, and had that been done by previous councils and then followed through with our council, we wouldn't be in the position we are. So there's history associated to this situation that we find ourselves in.
Thank you.
Sorry, if I can just speak quickly, just so people don't jump out the window at the end of the night. As Brian said, we're not alone in this. Every municipality in Ontario, probably North America or the West is facing this. There are a lot of challenges, a lot of infrastructure is all built at the same time. We are applying for grants all the time. We probably, between the staff and all the various grants we apply for, it's probably the equivalent of a full-time position, the amount of time that staff dedicate to applying for grants. And we are successful in a lot of those, not all of them, but a lot of them. We are looking at all sorts of other different ways to save money. We brought forward the grant stutters discussion earlier in August. There are things that we can look at, some of the growth with development charges. That discussion will come forward to council in the near future too, where we can potentially increase our development charges. It won't pay for our existing assets, but it will help offset the cost of things like the water tower and upgrades to the garage and fire station, or potentially new fire trucks. It's not all doom and gloom. Yes, there's a lot of challenges ahead of this council, just like there is every council. There will be a path forward. There will be options, and we will make it through. It's not the end of the world for Perth or for Ontarians.
But just, if I may ask a question, calendar wise, when are we starting the actual budget process?
So budget principles come to Cal in September. Assuming council agrees to some version of that. October is prep for staff, and then we start briefing council in November with approval of the 2025 budget by December.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any further questions? No, just remind you that this is corporate asset management plan update on the floor. I'll call the question. Those in favour? Yes, passed unanimously. And Councillor Smith, you're up again for 511.
As recommended by the committee of the whole, be it resolved that the council of the town of Perth pre-approve $5,297,826 for work on Craig Street in 2025, and two pre-approved $952,227 for the purchase of a replacement pumper in 2026, as presented in report Cal 2024-10.16.
Thank you. Would you speak to that?
Yeah, so practice in the past is we try and get particularly the road statements out for 10 minutes early so that we beat the rush, because there's lots of municipalities trying to go at the same time. So if council approves the Craig Street budget now, we can work through the tender and get it out in 2024, which hopefully will get better pricing because we're early into the resource allocation. And the pumper, it's a 2-year wait time to get the pumper. Yeah, so we have to place the order now if we want to get it by the 2026 replacement date. And it gets back to, there's not that many suppliers of fire equipment anymore, and it takes a while to get it.
Councillor Smith.
I noticed the $5 million for work on Craig Street in 2025. Is that tenders to do the job in 2027? On the wall there, it's Craig Street is 2027.
Oh, sorry, yes, and this year, we moved a couple of the segments around. And I'll send you the revised.
Is Craig Street gonna be done in
2025, and we moved something else to 2027.
Yeah, we shall all those.
Did we just switch 25 and 27? Yeah. Because there was a view that people thought Craig Street needed to work quicker
It
than
does, believe me.
Councillor Bolt.
So I ask this question all the time and I don't know why it doesn't sink in, but so. Here we are saying, well, we want to pre-approve $5.3 million for work to be done in Craig Street. Then we're gonna put it out to tender. The guys that are tendering the job already know that we're prepared to spend $5.3 million. To me, that's like saying, okay, guys, we're gonna spend $5.3 million, make sure you can do it for that, or even if you can do it less, I know you're gonna ask for $5.3 million, like, it doesn't make sense to me why we would tell the opposition what we want before they tell us what they're gonna do for us. Am I misunderstanding something here?
No, it gives my path certainly, but on the competitive process, generally been playing out pretty well, and Grant can gain, correct me if I'm wrong, but certainly the tender results have been highly competitive lately, and we've generally been under the budget for most of our capital projects when we've got out early.
Sure, and just as an example of that, the engineering services that council just approved. Moments ago, we had a budget of 550,000, which was public, which was advertised, and we got a bid in at 145. So 400,000 on the budget. So I get what you're saying, but I think in practice with competition in the market, there's still. People are trying to outbid each other to get the work, but.
If I could respond to that, my own comment to that, CAO, is that we're in an environment now, certainly in this area, where the little companies are all getting eaten up by the big fish, and all of a sudden, there's one big fat fish out there, and there's no competition, so that concerns me as well.
Thank you. Any other questions, observations? I'll call the question, those in favour? That passes unanimously. The next item, 512, as previously mentioned, has gone to the consent agenda. So 513, Councillor McCrea again.
Town of Perth Fire Prevention Policy, as recommended by the Committee of the Whole, be it resolved that the Council of the Town of Perth, number 1, pass a bylaw, number 51, being a bylaw to adopt a fire prevention policy, and number 2, approve a 3-day per week contract administrative position for 5 months as presented in report 2024 Committee of the Whole -10-15.
Thank you. Questions? Yeah, Councillor Bolt, then Councillor McCrea.
Thank you. Trevor, what exactly, I read the report, but what exactly will this help you achieve over a 5-month period?
So, the policy is something we've been doing for years, or attempting to do. Putting it on paper is sort of saying we've got to kind of meet these targets. Trying to meet these targets with 2 staff members doing these inspections and everything, planning everything, it's not quite feasible to do everything we need to hit. The hope for this trial process will be to relieve some of the scheduling issues we're having. So it's taking that a bit of admin stuff off the assistant chief and myself plate. And it's putting a little bit onto the admins. The admin can do a little more of that scheduling. But also is a trial to see if our current admin can do some of the smaller inspections. the smaller smoke line permits that take away the time when we're trying to do our bigger inspections of the bigger buildings of town. So it is a trial, something else we're hoping the trial, which will probably come forward once we start discussing budget, is a small bit of money for our volunteers to be able to help in this area as well. Just the big 2 points are education and enforcement. If we get good at those, we don't have to do the response is the expensive one.
So just a supplemental question, so you mentioned this is a trial. Do you envision then, if this is successful, that you'll be coming back to us and asking this to become a full-time position down the road? Is that where this is going, or?
That could be very well possible. We're trying to look at options. Really, we're trying to keep the needs and circumstances at the forefront. Everything's expensive. We've been talking about it all night, everything's going up. My job is to make the most efficient and inexpensive service we can. The last thing we want to do is get too many full-time staff in, because when you have volunteers, it starts to crumble, you start to get a disconnect there. We also are seeing our volunteers are having a lot more work with the new training requirements, which is great that they're hitting these training requirements, but it's more demands on our volunteers. We want to keep that volunteer model for as long as possible. So this is something we're trying to see if this can work. If it's even the scheduling so our volunteers can go and do some of the stuff that takes off the pressure, so we can get these tired some of the bigger issues we have.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor McRae.
So our fire department has provided prevention and fire safety at every turn. We always hear the mantra, educate, educate. The third part of the line of defense is enforcement. And what we need to do is work on that area of enforcement in order to prevent the final line of defense, which is the emergency response. In the report, Trevor has identified various occupancy types and minimal frequencies of inspections. In order to meet these requirements, we need additional human resources. And as we grow, the need will only get greater. The other thing I just want to highlight to everyone is, as we are all aware, our town is a tourist town. And that means we keep attracting all kinds of events, and the events are getting larger. Example would be Maple Fest. Another example would be Stewart Park Festival. Another example will be the night market, and the list goes on. And with these events, we have more people coming into our community, which then also creates a situation where there could be more risks. So I think it's very important in this situation that we support our volunteer fire department with this request.
Thank you. Any other question? I was. Yeah, you're cynical. A question, when a place is inspected, it doesn't remain inspected in perpetuity. It's a regular occurring event. And as Councillor McRae alluded, it's the demand's not going to get less as the town expands. Is that fair?
Yeah, fair guess, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, I'll call the question then. Those in favour? And that's unanimously passed. Councillor Bolt, 14, please.
Moved by myself as recommended by the committee of the whole, be it resolved that the council of the town of Perth, one, award tender number CS 2024-04 ice resurfacer to Resurface Corporation for the supply and delivery of one Olympia Millennium E SD ice resurfacer in the amount of $165,825 plus HST. And two, pass bylaw number 51XX, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to sign an agreement with Resurface Corporation for the supply and delivery of one ice resurfacer as presented in report 2024-CAL-10.19.
Thank you. I was warned not to refer to it as a Zamboni because it's a trade name, so go ahead.
So I've had many conversations over the last number of months, actually, about this very topic with the Director McNally, and I've done a lot of my own research as well. I'd like to remind council that not that many months ago, we unanimously agreed that we would spend $50,000 more for an electric ice resurfacer. And now we're at literally 40,000. In light of all of the discussion tonight, and all of the money that the millions and millions of dollars we're staring at going forward that we're gonna have to spend, I shake my head and say, well, at what cost? To look at the report and suggest that over 15 years, it'll actually be less expensive to have a battery-driven machine is unfair to all of us, because the technology hasn't been around long enough for us to look back 15 years and suggest, well, this is what the average cost of upkeep on one of these machines is or will be. We already know by the report that to replace a battery alone is $37,000. I suggest that you know, I've been working in the ring as an announcer for 25 years. I've never had an issue or seen an issue with us using propane to run the machine. We have excellent air facilities there to scrub the air. We've got you know, these machines are not as harmful as one might think. I've done some research on that. I spoke recently with a gentleman who is in Kathy's capacity with, I think it's called King City. And they recently decided to buy 2 of these ice resurfacers battery, but they had a budget of $85 million because they were building a brand new arena. They actually went with a different company, and their cost for the top of the line machine was $10,000 less than the one that we're seeing here. Their comment was that they didn't like the Olympia, they've had bad luck with the Olympia in the past, but I digress. All of that said, with the situation we're facing as a council and trying to find areas to save money, we have to start looking at some of these extra costs. So we're being asked to support a recommendation here to spend 30% more for an ice resurfacer when we could go with something that has been tried and true for many decades in this town. And you know, maybe 15 years from now, the technology will be such and the costs will be such that it would make more financial sense. I, for one, will not support this recommendation. I would support a recommendation to go with a propane driven machine that is going to be at the end of the day $40,000 cheap.
Thank you. I don't know if there's anyone started to speak about. Okay.
I'm not sure if there was you didn't have a question, just a statement?
That was a statement.
Yeah.
Any other questions? That's all clear.
Through the chair, I see that Kathy is not present tonight, so. Pardon?
I'm prepared to speak to the report.
I would appreciate if you would respond to the comments that Councilor Bowes just shared, to give staff's perspective with regards to that concern.
Sure. I'd just like to acknowledge that a member of our climate change panel in the audience too. The climate change committee was quite interested in this topic, as you can imagine. So Councilor Bowles is correct. It is more money up front for the EV model, just as with any EV, just like our truck we purchased in the 2 plug-in hybrids, which have generated significant operational savings. The way that we've always done things has got us to where we are today with a lot of our financial circumstances. We're looking at something that's different. I can't tell you how many hours and how many people that Kathy has talked to and the technical research that she has done to make sure that the numbers are right, anticipating a discussion at this meeting. Very confident in these numbers and in the savings over the lifespan of the unit. Yes, it's more upfront, but it will generate savings over the lifespan, $65,000 over that lifespan. Under the health and safety considerations there, in addition to the climate impacts, there's proven demonstrated scientific benefits removing the propane and the methane and the other emissions from inside the facility where children, and other vulnerable residents, are recreating and occupying that space. Our arena, the ice is in already, so we have a long season here in Canada where people are inside that arena ingesting these fumes. Yes, we have ventilation systems, but that comes at a cost as well. We didn't include the energy savings from not venting out all the heat and everything else out of the building every time the Zamboni, the ice resurfacer runs, and then having to replenish that air or reheat that air. And yeah, it's more upfront, but the cost savings and the health benefits over the lifespan, I think should speak for themselves. EVs are still somewhat in their infancy, but there are numerous municipalities around us throughout Eastern Ontario, similar size range, similar size municipalities that use EVs and Zamboni or ice resurfacers and have for not for 15 years, but for, I know in Kingston, it's been over 5 years now, at least. I have a colleague that works in the city of Belleville. They have multiple ones as well, all working just fine.
Thank you.
Worship.
When we were doing this strategic plan, I remember this section, I can't quote my memory, but saying basically that the town was pursuing the ideal of being green and that would include, for example, paying more for pickup trucks, whatever. And we all agreed to that. And I pointed out at the time that if it was in the strategic plan and we all agreed to it, then we shouldn't be going counter to that policy when the idea came up of buying something that was green as opposed to not. So I would just remind everyone of that, either we're behind the green initiatives or we're not.
To be fair, the interpretation of that I would suggest is that we would consider, and that's exactly what we're doing. We're not just saying we will only look at. So hence my question is the Resurface Corporation the only organization that provides electric equipment of this nature? And is the Olympia the only model?
Through the chair, I guess to clarify what the mayor and you have said, the wording in the strategic plan is to apply a climate lens to decisions like this. That's what we're doing now. This council reestablished the climate change committee because it believed in this and in applying that climate lens to infrastructure and asset replacement decisions. That is what staff have attempted to do in this report and in doing the extensive research that Kathy did. Through the chair, no, the Olympia is not the only manufacturer, it's not the only EV. That's the model we currently have. Staff did seek pricing from a variety of different suppliers, and this was the most cost-effective recommendation that we're putting forward.
Thank you. Any further questions?
I'd like to request a recorded vote, please.
Absolutely. Just been asked to provide a second of. General counsel. Okay. According to our bylaw, I've just been informed that the recorded vote can only be requested at council. We're in a committee of the whole meeting. So unfortunately, I understand your intent, but I will call the question.
Sorry, just to give you some more peace of mind. There was a change in the new procedural bylaw. This is coming forward then to kind of, if you vote against it now, it won't be in the consent agenda. coming forward to council in half an hour, and you can request a recorded vote at that point.
Okay, I call the question. Those in favour? And nay? Thank you. Thank you. We'll move on to number 6, which is CEO and Director Departmental Updates. The recent practice has become to ask if you assume that you've read all those, and if you have any members of council have any question in relation to any one of those, if they want to ask. Councillor McRae and then Councillor Waterfield.
Through you, Chair, I was wondering if Grant Mahon could give us a quick update on Cockburn and Tom Street.
So through the chair, Cockburn Street is advancing quite well. It's on or slightly ahead of schedule. They've got pipe extended from Arthur Street all the way to Rogers Road. So that's going very well. There is more rock than accounted for on Tom Street, so that is behind the times. There was a slight delay with the commencement of Tom Street because of some coordination with Enbridge and the proximity of the gas main. They brought in forces to catch back up, so both projects are going very well.
Thank you. Councillor Waterfield.
Through the chair, Councillor McRae asked my first question, so I'm going to go on to my second question. This is for Trevor. Trevor, I was looking at your report and I noticed in terms of calls for service, there was one vehicle versus pedestrian incident. I'm asking about that in that, has there been other calls for service in that particular location before? And where is it? I'm just trying to zero in on, is this a potential issue or a dangerous area?
Through the chair, I wouldn't say it's any more dangerous than any other spot at downtown core. No.
So where did it take place?
You're wrong. You're well. It was, chair, it's really at the corner of Foster Ward. Foster Ward. Okay.
Thank you, that's fine.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay, so the next committee of the whole, regular committee of the whole meeting is Tuesday, September the 10th at 5:30, and that will be Councillor Bolt in the chair. Any questions from the media? None? Okay, thank you. Councillor McRae, could I ask you to move the adjournment?
That the special committee of the whole meeting held on August 27th, 2024 be adjourned at 7:02 p.m.
Okay. Those in favour? Yes. Okay, so there will be approximately at least a 10-minute break. Give staff a chance to bring anything over to the consent agenda.